the BirdGuides Podcast.
Welcome to episode 6 of the BirdGuides Podcast. I'm Josh Jones, and today I'm joined by the ever-dependable David Campbell.
Hi there.
Ian Lysit's back from Sweden. How are you doing, Ian?
All right, thanks, Josh. Yourself?
Very well, thank you very much. And I'm very pleased to say that we're joined today by Brian McCloskey. Brian's a very keen and active Irish birder, and will be joining us to discuss various things to do with Irish birding today. How are you doing, Brian?
All good. Yeah, really looking forward to this.
Good stuff. Ian, tell us about your holiday. Good time in Sweden?
Excellent time in Sweden, thanks, Josh. Yeah, got a Swedish wife, so head out to Stockholm pretty much every summer, and then have a couple of days in Stockholm, and then head out to the island, which is Uta. It's one of the outer islands in the archipelago, and my wife's family have a summer house on there. It's not quite as grand as it sounds. It's quite basic, but the scenery is fantastic out there. It's a bit like being dropped into a commercial for a fabric conditioner, really. It's lots of blue skies, green, yeah, really nice. The weather's fantastic. Plenty of birds, nothing too gripping, but white-tailed eagles, lots of redback shrikes. Just typical Scandinavian fare, I think you'd say so.
Apart from one exception, ring-billed gull, right?
Ring-billed gull, yes. There was one of my mates told me that a ring-billed gull returned, actually, to a small square in central Stockholm. Turned up last summer and spent its time feasting on chips, and then disappeared in the winter, came back in April. That was there, so wandered down with the family. I looked for that and saw that after about 30 seconds of looking, it was eyeing up somebody's fries. So yeah, go look. It's quite funny actually. There's a burger joint next to the square, and apparently they've been scratching their heads trying to work out why they've suddenly seen a massive spike in people buying fries but not burgers during the summer. All the birders are just feeding it chips. So that was good. Yeah, what have you fellas been up to?
It's been pretty steady on patch. A few nice August bits just popping up over the last week. Actually, since we did the August pod, a few of the species that we talked about there have popped up on patch. So things like wood sand, for example, spotted redshank.
Nice.
Yeah, I've been focusing on the cliff tops, been getting things like spotted flycatcher, redstart, had a couple of nightingales croaking in the gorse. So yeah, been pretty good for passerines at my end.
How about yourself, Brian? What have you been up to?
Yeah, I've done a lot of birding in Dundalk Bay, which is on the northeast coast of Ireland, and yeah, it was pretty slim pickings. I refound a spoonbill on Saturday, which was a lovely adult, and other than that, the best wader I had was probably a second calendar year curlew sandpiper, no breeding plumage at all. I had that for 2 days, and then there's a really nice flock of dunlin and ring plover knocking around, and yeah, it's crying out for pectoral sandpiper or white rumps, but nothing yet.
So Dundalk is one of your patches then. Give us a bit of context to your birding background and where you're based and so on for the listeners.
Yeah, so I live in County Monaghan, which is in the northeast Midlands of Ireland. It's about 35 minutes from the coast. The local birding to me, like inland, is pretty poor. That's why I spend a lot of time on the coast. Lurgan Green in Dundalk Bay is probably the place I spend the most time at, but it's really tide dependent. You could go if you go on a mid tide or a low tide, you're going to see nothing. But if you time it right, it can be really good. Yeah, so quite slow most of the year. But yeah, I've been lucky enough to dig out a couple of good bits over the years. Yeah, so
prime time, late summer, isn't it? That's the thing. All the returning waders and terns and so on, as you suggested.
Yeah, coming into the autumn, I'm excited. If there's always good numbers at Dunlin, but I've never really dug anything out with them. But this year, I'm going to make a proper effort to, try to dig something out. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and just talk us through your sort of history and how you got into birding. You're obviously one of Ireland's keenest listers, I think it's fair to say, and a lot of people will be well aware of you, having encountered you through social media and whatnot over the years. But just talk us through your kind of history in birding in Ireland and beyond.
Yeah, so I suppose I've been mad into birds for as long as I can remember. My dad was he was great at general knowledge on kind of all things nature. So I have 3 brothers. We're all really close in age, but for some reason, Dad pointing out the differences of different flowers and trees and birds stuck with me, and not any of the rest of them. So I still remember Dad pointing out the difference between moorhens and coots and the songs of willow warblers and chiffchaffs. I still remember seeing my first gannet, hen harrier, stuff like that. And kind of from the age that was probably when I was like 6, maybe 7. And yeah, by the time I was 11, I was just totally obsessed. I think the first twitch I ever begged Dad to bring me on was for a great grey shrike. I don't know if you remember that one, Josh. It was in Antrim. It was back in April 2011. I think it was the first in 40 years, and there hasn't been one since. So at the time, you don't appreciate these kind of birds, but I look back and think that is probably one of the best birds I've seen in Ireland. And then, over the next few years, I kind of got for bits and pieces things like ivory gull and Tecumseh Lake and elegant Tern and Kerry. And then I suppose over the last 10 years, and especially since I've started driving maybe in 6-7 years ago, I've twitched absolutely everything that was new for me in Ireland. So I'm a pretty obsessive lister, but I love birding just as much. Got the bug, yeah.
And you get beyond Ireland too, right? You're pretty extensively travelled in the Western Polarctic.
Yeah, I mean, that's only quite recent. So about 3 years ago, it had all kind of slowed down a bit in Ireland in terms of getting new birds. I was still getting quite a few, but not as much as I was in previous years. So I kind of got the West Pal bug in terms of, I'd done a couple of really good trips. One to Morocco in particular. That was the first one. And we cleaned up, including getting really good views of Andalusian hemipode. So that was the slippery slope for me, because once I saw that, I was like, if I can see the most difficult species in the Western Pal, I can see every other species. So yeah, I've had some really good trips in the last couple of years, but I've started kind of twitching, not everything, just the birds that are like, that really interest me. So like I went for the Indian pond heron in Kuwait, Pacific swift in Italy. I've twitched a few things in Britain, and obviously the spectacle eider in Holland, but I think most people went for that. So yeah, it's just adding another kind of dimension to my birding, if that makes sense. I'm absolutely loving it. Obviously Ireland is the priority. It can be really quiet most of the year in Ireland. It's good to have these kind of trips to look forward to and targeting pretty difficult species, and keeps me busy.
So is world birding next, or are you content with that?
I'm afraid to go into world birding because I've such an addictive personality when it comes to these kind of things. But in November of next year, I'm doing Bermuda. So that's the first non-West Pal trip I'll be doing. So yeah, and then who knows what will follow after that. But yeah,
it's a slippery slope.
It is, yeah. Yeah.
So in today's episode, we were just going to have a little bit of a chat about what's going on really in terms of the latest bird news, the latest sightings from around Britain and Ireland. Brian's on. There's quite a strong Irish slant to today's episode, with looking at things like Seawatching and 1 or 2 rarities as well. I think probably the biggest news since we were last recording is that Zitting Cisticola has bred in Suffolk again for the 2nd year running. The official line from Natural England was that at least 11 birds were present, up to 3 males, singing males that is, and at least 7 juveniles from 3 broods as of the first week of August 2026. That's quite an escalation on last year, which in itself was a bit of a surprise.
Yeah, you would assume, though, that's offspring breeding with offspring, is it?
Yeah, probably slightly incestuous, you'd think.
You'd reckon so.
Yeah, I wouldn't rule out, though, some fresh ones coming in.
Yeah, there have been a couple of records this year, haven't there?
Yeah, and if you're a Zitting Cisticola that's freshly arrived along the southeast there, and you're going along the coast, you might not have been noticed because you're bombing through you wouldn't have been picked up by birders, but you hear it from another male, or from a male. If you're a female looking for a mate, then you'll dive in there, won't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the thing, isn't it? That the location at first might seem slightly unusual. Suffolk, I think probably the natural progression, people would have thought, oh, maybe Kent first. That's the next hop across from the continent, where, of course, the species is pretty established now, as close as northern France. And yeah, they seem to have bypassed Kent altogether and ended up in Suffolk. But as David says, all it takes is one overflying bird to drop in and hear that song, and off you go. But yeah, it's definitely a species that's been on the up after a bit of a gap, actually. There was a little bit of a glut of records between 2006 and 2010, 4 of which were in Kent, including a bird that lingered for several months in the Pegwell Bay area, which I saw. You might have seen that one, Dave.
Yeah, that was fairly early twitch for me, got that.
Yeah, was that a tick for you in, or have you seen one before?
No, I saw one at Hengistbury in Dorset in 2000, I think that was.
Oh, okay,
and I
yeah.
think that was just after there'd been one at Portland. So presumably those birds had piled out from Brittany and made landfall there.
Yeah, yeah. But there was these four in Kent in the late 2000s, but then there was a real big gap. And it was best part of, I think it was about 14 years until the next one at Dover in June 2024. But feels like there's no looking back since then, really. There's been a handful of records, mostly in Kent, and of course the Suffolk birds as well. But yeah, where next?
I really reckon unless there's a really nasty winter coming along soon, this is a real turning point for the species in Britain. It's got a history of advancing across Europe and not stopping until they literally get killed off. And
Killed off by what, Dave?
by hard weather.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, nothing more sinister than that. The way they're going, and I was reading earlier, apparently females can breed in their first calendar year,
Wow.
and they can have 2 or 3 broods a year. So unless anything holds them back, like a harsh winter, I think fast forward 5-10 years, and they might be all over at least the Suffolk coast. You know.
Yeah. Wouldn't take much, you feel. There was one at Skagen in Denmark, wasn't there, in 2024, which was there for quite some time. And just out of interest, ahead of this pod, I was looking at the latitude of Skagen compared to any like a UK town, and it's the same latitude north as Lossiemouth in Moray. So if one can sing there and set up territory there, in basically what the equivalent of northern Scotland, you'd think that a good proportion of England is pretty habitable for them.
Definitely. Yeah, I think it's only going in one direction with that species.
Still a bit of a pipe dream in Ireland, though, Brian.
There's actually just 2 records, both from Cape Clear, one in 1962 and one in 1985. But yeah, I think the first record, it was 8 years before it got accepted. I think that the thought at the time was that they didn't move, they didn't really migrate at all. And then I think it became known that they actually do short distance movements. So then it ended up getting accepted. Yeah, it's. I was kind of keeping a close eye on that with seeing that they bred again, and you do wonder, could they push through and maybe make it to Ireland again? But Shetty's warbler has really started to get a foothold in Ireland now, and that's pretty recent. So it's not impossible, but it probably would take quite a while.
Yeah, I mean, Chetty's was a mega bird in Ireland not so long ago.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think Richard Bonser found the third record for Ireland in 2011 or 2010 even. It was the time that the Northern Harrier was there. So yeah, the records have just exploded since then, particularly in the last maybe 6-7 years. Certainly, probably since 2022 anyway, records have just gone through the roof in Ireland. So yeah.
Yeah, I think if it does end up going the way of Chetty's, which seems relatively feasible, it could be 15-20 years and they'll be all over much of England. So yeah, watch this space with that one.
Yeah.
And it goes without saying that you can find out where to see the Zitting Cisticolas in Suffolk with updates on the BirdGuides app. New and returning customers are entitled to a 30-day free trial. And what better time to be taking that out with the thrilling autumn weeks just ahead of us. So, moving on from Cisticolas, how about sea watching? Late summer, always the sea watching season, but your thoughts really on how the season's going so far? I suppose we should cut to Brian as our resident sea watcher. What are your thoughts?
I mean, so far it's been pretty poor. It's actually been really disappointing. This is my favourite time of the year. Yeah, I usually spend a lot of time sea watching, and this year it's just been high pressures and yeah, very little in the way of good sea watching conditions. I had one good day at the end of July where we had really good count of Wilsons. We had 28 Wilson storm petrels. Yeah, not a whole lot else. We had good numbers of Corys and great cheers. But other than that, it was pretty slim pickings. You get a better variety of species in August. But so far, it's been really poor. And it was pretty disappointing because this time last week, it was looking like the weekend just gone was going to be really, really promising. But yeah, it just faded into nothing, unfortunately.
Yeah, these hot and settled conditions they do the sea watching a disservice, really. It just falls off a cliff if the winds aren't blowing. It does seem like the birds are out there, though. There's been some really big Corey shearwater counts, for example, off the west coast of Ireland. So it feels like the birds are out there. We just need the blow to get them inshore.
Yeah, absolutely. And I even saw yesterday it was a forced tree wind, and there was Wilsons were off the Bridges of Ross again, and on Saturday night there was the Fia's Petrel, and that was in literally nothing. So it's the birds just do. It does seem like they are just out there. So it makes me wonder, like with the right conditions, how good a sea watch could actually be this year. But yeah, there's nothing even in the long range forecasts. It's all looking a bit bleak for sea watching, unfortunately.
So what do you look for, Brian, when you're planning? You've got a day free for going sea watching. You're trying to pick where to go and what conditions would be good. What are you ideally looking for, and how are you making a decision as to which site you're going to head to?
The only site I go to is the Bridges of Ross, because I've put so much time in there, and I've really been rewarded with putting time in there. And I'm kind of now, if I change it up and go somewhere else, that'll be the day at Trindade Petrel or something goes past the Bridges. But I think the ideal conditions are, what you want is a really good southerly kind of coming from either the Bay of Biscay or the Azores, that then swings into a westerly off the west coast of Ireland. The southerly brings the birds up, and then the westerly pushes them close to shore. And if you get that, it can be really good. I've been on some amazing sea watches in similar conditions, and yeah, if you get that, now those conditions are pretty rare. If there was a force 5 westerly, I kind of think from force 5 and above, force 5, force 6, because it can actually get kind of too windy and the birds just don't fly. So if you get a 5 or 6, it's west northwest. It can be phenomenal off the Bridges of Ross, and just the west coast in general, but particularly the Bridges of Ross. I feel anyway. Yeah,
and yeah, the bridges. What I love about that is just the fact that you're low down, and also you've got that northerly view. You're sitting looking north-ish, which obviously helps with the light through the day as well. So you've generally got pretty good light throughout the day, so you can get a solid day's sea watching in, even if it's pretty bright conditions.
Yeah, I have found that. I've tried other spots. I've done a couple of days on Gallyhead in Cork, and maybe there'll be some Cork birders listening to this and they won't agree with this, but I just find sea watching in West Cork can be so frustrating because you're looking into the sun for most of the day, and you're quite high up there, but on the Bridges you're low down. Everything is totally manageable, and the light is fantastic throughout most of the day because it's set in the west, so you have amazing light. And yeah, I just think it's the perfect sea watching spot. And in the hollow where we sit, you have really good shelter. So on a westerly you're totally sheltered because you're kind of looking northwest. On a northwesterly it can be a bit tricky because you have sea spray and the wind is kind of in your face there, but if you have a westerly it can just be absolutely brilliant. So yeah, fingers crossed we get a couple of days before the end of the month, but it's not looking great at the moment.
And you get a good crowd turning up in those kind of conditions?
It's funny, the first time I was ever on the Bridges, it was back in 2011, and I remember I begged Dad to bring me down, and there was actually 38 British birders me and Dad were the only Irish birders there, but I think most lads actually got Fias. That's what they were over for. And once everybody kind of got Fias, yeah, most lads just stopped coming. But in recent years, you could go, it's not overly busy. If there was really good conditions, you might get 10 or 12 lads, but on average conditions, you might be there with 4 or 5 other lads. So that way, everybody's kind of sitting together, nothing gets missed. It's an awful lot easier to get on stuff because you're only listening to 1 or 2 people shouting directions. Yeah, it's my favourite type of birding by a mile.
Very happy days sea watching at the Bridges of Ross, that's for sure.
Yeah.
The settled conditions aren't very good for land-based sea watching, but they are a bit more amenable if you're on a boat floating around in the Atlantic somewhere. And there's been some pretty decent Wilson storm petrel counts, for example, from pelagics off County Cork. I think there was 40 or more, weren't there, from one of the pelagics off Cork in early August, which is pretty impressive going. But the starbird, arguably, from that was a fascinating looking Pterodroma petrel seen by Paul Connaughton on one of his Shearwater Wildlife Tours pelagics. Really interesting looking bird. You can see the video of the bird that Paul filmed on his Facebook page, the Shearwater Wildlife Tours Facebook page. But yeah, really interesting bird.
Yeah, and it comes with a warning for colourful language, understandably, that video, because he was just casually filming storm petrels, wasn't he? And this thing shot through. And you can see half a second after it appears in the frame, his phone just drops to the floor, and he has an understandable reaction to that appearing.
Yeah, it's an amazing video, isn't it? It's like, that's the dream, getting a Pterodroma from a boat. And to be able to video the whole thing in terms of the bird actually coming into view for the first time, it's a pretty amazing video.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I must admit, when I saw the video, I quite quickly thought, my goodness, this looks like a pretty good shout for Zeno's petrel. I say that with the caveat that it's now several years since I went to Madeira and saw Zenos from a boat on a few evenings there one June. But yeah, just the way the bird's moving, it's this really rapid flight, sharp twists and turns. It just really brought back memories of watching Xenos in Madeira. And the caveat was that Paul, did he either forget his camera or decide to leave it at home?
He forgot it.
Yeah, it's a bad day to leave your camera at home.
Yeah.
He'd got
It's
some stunning shots, wouldn't he, if he brought that?
yeah, it did a couple of passes. Like, yeah, it's a pretty gripping bird. It looks very promising for Xeno. Even some stills, you can see the underwing, and it looks like there is a lot of white going on. And it's also really small-bodied as well, which some of the Fias types I've seen have been really heavy-chested, almost like barrel-chested. But that looks, a really interesting bird.
Quite enjoyed Bob Flood's comment. That's Bob Flood from Silly Pelagics. He said, "If that's not a Xenos, I'll eat my hat."
Well, that's a good endorsement.
Bob
Yeah.
Pinto.
Absolutely. So yeah, that was a bit of excitement, but slim pickings otherwise on the seabird front, at least in Britain and Ireland. But Bulwer's Petrels in Galicia from Estaca de Berez in early August, astonishing count of 106 in a day on the 3rd of August, which was a new record day total for what is considered by many people to be Europe's top sea watching site. Absolutely blitzed the previous record day total, which stood at 10 previously. A bit of an enigma, really, in British and Irish waters, though. Only one accepted Irish record. Brian, can you tell us a bit more about that one?
Yeah, it was in July 2013. It was the 31st of July. There was really good sea watching off Galley Head. There was 3 Fias Petrels seen on the same day. And then the next day, on the 1st of August, Paul Moore, I think Paul found it, and then Dennis O'Sullivan and Alec Jeffries did a Bulwers off Galley Head. That's the stuff of dreams, really, isn't it? Any dark rumped petrel is the stuff of dreams, but a Bulwers, that's as good as it gets. And
It's the ultimate prize.
It's the ultimate prize, yeah. And I kind of really felt it, maybe that Bulwers might have been on the cards if the weather for the weekend just gone materialised. I could be wrong, but I think the first land-based off Spain was only in the last couple of years. And then obviously it went to that count to 10, and now it's 106. So there's obviously something going on. Whether I suspect they're not like vagrants, that they're probably just out there, which does give hope that maybe it will repeat in Ireland someday.
It does feel, though, unlike several other previously very rare seabirds, that it's not quite happening for bulls for whatever reason. You look at like the sea change in Scopoli's shearwater records, South Polar skewer, another one, even just the more regular species, the cories and greats. That there's been a big change. We know that's probably to do with warming sea temperatures and associated movements, prey, of food. But yeah, for whatever reason, it's just not quite happened with Bulwers yet, at least. But it feels like it's probably on the cards imminently at some point. Surely it's going to happen. There's going to be a well-watched or well-documented bird at some point.
Yeah, I wonder if it's just lagging behind a little bit, and it's inevitably not going to be as dramatic as those large shearwaters, partly because they're probably more thinly spread at sea, and also don't they feed more on the sea rather than feeding down? They'll just sit in one spot and dip their head down and just guzzle away that way, so they'll probably be a bit less conspicuous. Doesn't probably lend itself to them being spotted so easily.
Yeah, and I suppose the other thing is Estaca is much closer to the deeper water, than off Ireland or Britain, for example. So it's hard to know. I reckon it will happen, but yeah, it could be a few years yet. It will be interesting to see what the numbers are like off Estaca in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, maybe it will happen.
Yeah, I find
one to watch.
The split of Wilson's Petrels is sort of, when I was out in the 80s on the Chalice Pelagic, we were out for 3 days. I think we saw a then British record of 15 amongst several hundreds European storm petrels, and these days the split appears to be almost 50-50, which is incredible, really.
Yeah, Wilson's is definitely one that's experiencing a real uptick, isn't it? The numbers just in the southwest approaches now seem to be extraordinary compared to what they were even 10 years ago. Certainly something going on there anyway.
Yeah, Bulwer's Petrel must have one of the most muddied histories as a British rarity, though, isn't it? Because a lot of claims previously that were accepted and have been thrown out, a few previous claims seem to have ended up being nightjars, because you're just not expecting to see a nightjar flying out offshore, and Bulwer's Petrel has a passing resemblance in terms of shape and flight.
Yeah, I suppose so, yeah.
And there's a run of records in Yorkshire, wasn't there, quite a long time ago, which pre-modern birding, which people have been looking back at and thinking, maybe given that one turned up in about 500 kilometres inland in Germany a few years ago, maybe it's not too much of a stretch for one to have got up inland in Yorkshire.
Yeah, fascinating. And seabirds, they always keep us guessing, don't they? That's for sure. That's for me, that's the joy of sea watching. You're just never quite sure what's going to come around the corner. You're never sure what's coming next, and It keeps you there, doesn't it? It keeps you there. We're going to take a short break now, but we'll be back shortly with more chatter about what's going on in the birding world. Welcome back to the second part of today's pod. We're talking all things sightings today, all the latest rare bird news. One of the interesting reports that cropped up this week was a possible snowy egret in Co Kerry in Western Ireland. Interesting looking bird. Do you want to give us a bit of context to that one, Brian?
Yeah, it was a pretty scary looking bird, really. There were several features that were kind of look good for snowy egret. Yeah, I got the pictures, I think, was it Monday night? It was really quite late. And then it was Tuesday, I'm pretty sure, that more pictures, the uploaded pictures came through. And I think it baffled most people in Europe nearly. Why would a little egret be showing such yellow lores? The kind of the lores being connected over the top of the bill. Obviously, there was a couple of things that were wrong for it in terms of like the legs, the leg colour, the eyes were really pale. So yeah, it was a bird that caused a lot of discussion. Yeah, I do think though for snowy egret, I've chatted to you offline about this, Josh. For a snowy egret, pictures of them on the Azores and they just stick out like a sore thumb. And I suspect if it was a snowy egret, that there probably wouldn't be anything really wrong for it. And I suppose when you try to kind of shoehorn a bird like that to kind of make it fit, it probably means it isn't one.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. There were three clear issues, weren't there? As you say, the iris colour, the sort of grey-green tones in the lores, which were otherwise really quite yellow, and then there's all dark legs. The problem is when you've got vagrants, it's just what's the likelihood of an unusual-looking or aberrant snowy egret or an unusual-looking or aberrant little egret. Nonetheless, it is a bird that we should be looking out for, and it feels to me like it's fallen off the radar a bit in a kind of Western European context, or certainly a British and Irish context in recent years. Now, some of you might disagree with me, but of course we have had a British record, which was 2001 to 2002 up in southwest Scotland, moved around quite a lot, currently unrecorded in Ireland. But I just feel like back in the 2000s, there were quite a few claims of possible probable snowy egrets, which ultimately didn't manifest to anything. But it was one of those birds that was clearly in people's minds, and it feels like that's fallen by the wayside a bit. I do feel like probably because of the rise of egrets in the UK, especially little egret, we've become a little bit blasé about them, and you don't normally check every single one. Certainly I wouldn't, but even out west, I mean, I know this from having done quite a lot of birding in Western Ireland, but there's quite a lot of little egrets now out there, and you might be driving around an estuary and you just drive past one and just assume it's going to be a little egret, and you're not actually checking. Well, of course, that was probably one of the key reasons the Scottish bird got sussed out so quickly, is because back then little egret would have been such a rare bird up there that every one you'd probably pay attention to.
Yeah, we must have overlooked them since that first bird. I do wonder if it's one of the most likely species if somebody wanted to put some time aside to really delve into some online galleries and go through years' worth of photos. Maybe there could be one lurking in an image.
And I mean, Ireland certainly has had a lot rarer herons turn up, like little blue and yellow crowned night heron. You really think when you look at records from the Azores that snowy egret should really be on the cards for us. But maybe this recent bird in Kerry will make people double check more egrets. It must happen at some stage.
I think surely it's going to happen. Yeah, sorry, Dave.
I was just going to say, the other thing is it doesn't really feature prominently in many field guides or much literature. It's not really an ID issue that's printed very much. And in people's minds, that hasn't helped, I'm sure, either.
Did you see the Scottish one, Ian?
I did, yeah. Went with my dad, funnily enough. I didn't go straight away. It's on a golf course in Anstruther, I think it was. So he went up in January 2002. I think it'd been around for a little bit. Just rocked up and it was showing down to about 3 or 4 feet, as they do, just grubbing around in this little stream in a golf course. Had a great day out.
Yeah, stuff of dreams, really. That was just before I got into twitching, and at that time it was quite fresh in the memory. I think it was about 6 months before I went to my first twitch, that bird disappeared, and I just thought, there'll probably be another one, and here we are, 20 odd years on, and it's not given us a sniff yet.
It seems extraordinary that we haven't had one, really. As you say, I'm sure they must be overlooked. I can't believe that we haven't had one sneak in from the west somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think it's one of those birds that's most likely going to be the Hebrides or Western Ireland. I think is surely going to be a big shout for one.
And probably a similar issue with American great egret as well. maybe getting swamped out by great egrets before we've even had a record in Britain and Ireland.
Yeah, it's
There's
funny. There's been
Irish records.
There's been a couple of Irish records. So even as recent as it's only 2 or 3 years ago, there was a bird. I think it was Niall Keogh that actually dug out the pictures of a bird photographed in Laois. There was a perfect American great egret, and then there was a record from Derry in, I think it was 1997, and it's suspected there was one on Cape Clear at the same time that may well have been American as well. And then the original Irish first, I think it was 1984. That was showing characteristics as well of American great egret. So yeah.
Oh, cool. So you're ahead of the game in Ireland for those.
Yeah, I'd love another one though, because there's talk of them potentially being split.
Likely, isn't it?
It's looking likely, yeah.
Another big story in the British birding scene is the sooty tern at Co Kerry Island. It was there on the 3rd of August and was back there again this morning. We're recording on the 10th of August, so 2 visits a week apart. First British record since 2023, which is a flyby in Cornwall. And before that, 2020, a bird which visited a few counties along the east coast. I think it was actually seen in North Wales at Kemlyn as well. And that was presumably in turn a returning bird that was seen in the summers of 2018 and 2019. So certainly one for the newer generation of British listers, but always an exciting bird when these dark-backed terns turn up.
Yeah, I've not got up there yet myself. I'm guessing, Ian, you don't need it, and Josh too, so I'm behind on that.
Seen one at Kemlyn, well, however many years ago that was. Yeah, a very fine-looking sight. Do like Kemlyn, great place for terns. Seen bridal tern there as well, actually.
Yeah, it's had a lot there. How about in Ireland, Brian? What's the sketch of that species?
Yeah, there's only 2 records. The first record was found in July 2002 off the Bridges of Ross. I think Richard Millington found that. I think there was 4 lads on that sea watch. Richard Millington, Killian Mallarney, Pat Lonergan and Jeff Pearson. So that was the first Irish. And I think it's a funny story that Aidan Kelly had turned down a lift to go sea watching for that sea watch. Missed the sooty tern, and then it was only 3 years later, the next Irish record. In 2005, that was the bird that was found in Anglesey originally, and then 6 days later it was found on Rockabill, and then it went between Anglesey, Dublin and County Down. But yeah,
that was one I saw, yeah.
Is it? Yeah, that's 21 years ago.
Thanks.
Yeah, I would love a repeat, but yeah, I have it on my West Pal list because they obviously breed on Graciosa and the Azores. But yeah, an Irish one would go down well.
Surely overdue, I'd say, given the glut of British records in recent years. I saw that one at Kemlyn as well in 2005, and it felt like a really mega bird, almost a once-in-a-generation bird back then, but it seems to have been pretty regular, really, over the last decade or so in Britain. So surely it's overdue in Ireland at some point. Probably one of these estuaries near you, Brian, one of these East Coast estuaries where there's a nice tern roost.
Yeah.
Pop down there one July or August.
Well, yeah, that would be ideal. Even bridal tern. There's never been a live bridal tern in Ireland.
That's amazing.
Yeah, the Tideline Corpse on the Bull Island is the only record. So yeah, it's still not on Category A of the Irish list.
Extraordinary.
Yeah, pretty bizarre.
Yeah, that was a bit of excitement, but also one bird that seems to have given itself up, although presumably not for Ian, given he's been in Sweden, is blue-cheeked bee-eater. Now, this is it's a bird that Ian famously said he's very much looking forward to one turning up and sitting there for him to go and see. And one's now been in Orkney for the best part of a month, still there in recent days on North Ronaldsay, having moved around various islands. But yeah, Ian, tempted?
A little bit tempted, but yeah, trying to wedge that in with family commitments and such like probably wouldn't score very highly with other members of the team. It may have to sit there and just annoy me.
That's what happens with these birds, I find, in the Northern Isles. I'm not going to twitch the Northern Isles anymore. I'm a failed twitcher, remember, but these birds that just sit there for ages just eat away at you day after day. It was the same with the varied thrush. When that was there, it was just gnawing away at me, and I was just like, oh, you're almost cracking, but you resist the temptation. But even after all these years of not being a kind of keen and competitive lister / twitcher, they still grind.
Yeah.
This one feels like
I'll see the next one. That'll be the expression.
Yeah, this species feels like a safe bet for the next one, exactly, for being a bit nearer mainland. There's been a few late summer records in the last few years, so surely it's not long before one is in a slightly more accessible location.
It wouldn't surprise me if it's this one, this individual. It wouldn't surprise me if it just ends up drifting down the east coast in the next few weeks or something like that.
Yeah, that's a good shout.
We can hope.
Or the West Coast.
Oh, yeah, sorry, the West Coast, yeah, of course, yeah. Yeah, that would be all right. That's the sort of bird that I can imagine turning up on headland in County Mayo or something for a few days in June or July one year, Brian.
Yeah, absolutely. Somewhere like Belmullet or Tory Island or something like that. But
Yeah, Dave Sotheby's garden.
Yeah, and no better place, but it's yet to happen.
I just love how this blue-cheeked beetle was found by a young lad out checking his sheep with his dad, and the message about it woke up island bird David Roach while he was having an afternoon nap. The full story is going to be in the September issue of Birdwatch. Yeah, it sounds like quite a fun afternoon for David when it turned up.
It sounds like, it looks like it's been giving some absolutely amazing views, which I don't know if you guys have seen them abroad, but I remember seeing a lot of them in, for example, Azerbaijan, and they were nesting in holes in the ground. There was a big colony of them, and you could drive through this colony, but the birds were so showy, they were just sitting around on the ground, on the sand, looking absolutely stunning, vivid green, and you could almost touch them, and it feels like that bird's doing something similar here. It's just giving really close views, a few metres away, and some absolutely stunning photographs.
Yeah.
Yep, and one other talking point in a British context, black storks. There's been some interesting black stork action going on for the last couple of weeks, predominantly involving these two juvenile storks which have been touring around together but now seem to have split up. They were first seen in County Durham on the 24th of July, then ended up in Cornwall 4 days later, and you think, oh, they're off to the continent now, see you later. But then bizarrely U-turned, ended up in South Wales on the 30th of July, then Cheshire for a couple of days, then leaving Cheshire a few hours later they were in Lincolnshire at Gibraltar Point, where they stayed overnight, and then the following afternoon they reached Suffolk, and then they've been patrolling the East Anglian coast, now separated, for the days since. But yeah, I mean, black storks are often they're obviously a pretty regular vagrant in the UK. They're often very tame, very showy birds that end up lingering and putting in long stays. Quite unusual for birds to be tracked around the country in this manner. But yeah, I suppose that's another one that's pretty rare on your side of the Irish Sea, Brian.
Yeah, it's pretty surprising when you see how they're basically annual in Britain. It is pretty bizarre. The first Irish record was 1987 in Dublin. Two birders had that fly over a place called Foxrock, and it flew towards Dublin City. But then it wasn't until 2012 Paul Troke found one on a wind farm in County Clare, and I'm not sure if that one was seen again, but certainly the next record in 2017 was tracked from Mayo, and it was last seen flying over Rathlin Island. And then last year there was a bird flying north over Thursday Island, which was seen 2 days later in Lochgill in County Kerry. And yeah, no, there's never been a twitchable one. So
all the big listers need it.
Every one of them, yeah.
Right, wow.
So a black stork, I think was it last year? I can't remember where it was. There was a black stork just sat somewhere in Britain for weeks or months.
At Frampton Marsh, was it?
It could have been Frampton.
Oh, no, Suffolk, wasn't it?
Or was it? Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
When you see stuff like that, you're just like, why couldn't that be Ireland? It would be the most popular vagrant of the year.
They seem to do it pretty regularly in the UK. There's been a really good run of records in Lincolnshire. Not that I've seen one in my home county, but there's been a couple at Frampton that have done that and lingered for weeks. And then I think about 10 years ago, there was one just north of Bourne, where the BirdGuides and Birdwatch office is based. There was one in just lolloping around in a ditch for about a week, showing to meters, and then that just got up and flew. It was tracked south of Peterborough a few hours later, and it must have flown directly over my child at home, which was quite gripping, and my patch. One day. And some nice news, finally, worth just mentioning, the return of one of last year's fledged Montagu's Harriers. Of course, Montagu's Harrier bred in Britain for the first time last year, successfully for several years. The location of the nest, of course, remains unidentified, but this bird was ringed and has returned. It's a second-year male. It's been seen in Oxfordshire in late July. Nice to see that a bird is returning, and gives us a little bit of hope that maybe, just maybe, this species might be back at some point in the future.
Yeah, maybe recruiting back into the really on the verge of being called a regular population, isn't it? It's not a regular breeder really anymore, but if a bird's coming back to England, then that's a good sign.
Yeah,
gone are the days where they were regular around the Wash, for example, and you must have seen them on plenty of occasions.
Used to see them round the back of King's Lynn, Sandringham. There was usually a pair, or some years more than one pair. I think one year there was two pairs knocking about there. But I don't know whether they're doing awfully well on the continent these days. I think it's in decline pretty much everywhere, isn't it?
Seems to be struggling, doesn't it? Certainly you see some really worrying statistics from, for example, Spain, don't you?
Yeah, I think they're not getting on well in. A lot of them have been nesting in agricultural fields rather than marshes, and that doesn't really end up working well for them in the long term. It needs some hands-on intervention to make sure that they aren't chopped up and that they get broods off.
Cheerful stuff, Dave, that.
Yeah.
That's put me off. No, I was just going to say that actually it feels like pallid harrier is almost as regular as Montagu's in some years in the UK now. There was quite a good year for Montes a couple of years ago, but yeah, pallid seems to be very much on the up while Montes is gradually slipping away.
Yeah, I would also say that certainly in Ireland, Northern Harrier is a far easier bird than Montagu's in recent years.
That's amazing.
Yeah, Montagu's is really difficult. I've only seen one. It was a real bogey bird for me, but yeah, Northern Harrier just seems available every year now in Ireland. So it's, yeah.
Probably more pallids in Ireland than Montes as well, aren't they, Brian?
Yeah, in recent years.
In recent years,
yeah. In recent years, I think there's probably about there's probably more than 10 records now of pallid. I'd have to double check. But yeah, pallid seems to be a lot more regular and certainly easier to twitch probably than Montagu's, yeah.
Extraordinary. But anyway, we hope that this is the sign of a recovery in the sort of very much skeletal British population of Montes, but we'll have to wait and see on that front. One final bit of news, not specifically bird related, but I don't know if you guys have seen this. There's an island for sale off the west coast of Ireland, off the west coast of County Galway actually, a place called Ardilorn. It's on the market for €750,000 if anybody fancies stumping up the cash. It might be quite an interesting project.
It looks like an ideal location.
Really well located, isn't it? Yeah. Imagine a small garden on there. What would be possible? I think it's just south of Inishbofin, and when you see what Inishbofin has had over the last 20 years, yeah, it's scary to think what could end up occurring there.
I'm just going to quote the listing. It says, the island extends to approximately 32 hectares with the benefit of 2 natural freshwater lakes and some of the most stunning scenery in the west of Ireland. The island measures 1.2 by 0.4 kilometres and rises to a maximum height of 63 metres above sea level. And apparently it has breeding seabirds, including Manx shearwater and European storm petrel as well. So that would be quite nice to keep you awake on a summer's evening.
Yeah, it sounds just made for a birder to just go and have a happy life out there, plant a little garden, like you say, and maybe stick a couple of nets up. I see there's one report of a bird on the island, as far as I could find, which was a red rump swallow 11 years ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow, who found that, I wonder?
Yeah, no idea. But that was the only land bird record I could find for there. There's a few seabirds seen probably from boats nearby that have been, reported from the wider area. But yeah, somebody found a red rump swallow there in 2015.
Looks a bit lacking in vegetation from what I could see on Google Maps.
Yeah, I think you'd have to put in a few windbreaks and plant a few trees, I think, wouldn't you? And it'd be a long-term project, that's for sure.
Yeah, the BirdGuides Bird Observatory, maybe.
Yeah, I know. I was just thinking that would be quite nice. We'll have to try and convince. I was going to say we'll have to try and convince the powers that be that stumping up the cash is a worthwhile investment. But yeah, it's safe to say that the only dwelling on the island is looking a little dilapidated, to say the least. But yeah, imagine the yanks that you get there over the years. Crikey, exciting stuff.
Definitely, yeah.
Okay, that's all we've got time for on today's episode. We'll be back very soon with a roundup of all the latest bird news that's going on around Britain, Ireland and beyond. But first of all, I want to say thanks for joining us, Brian. It's been a pleasure to have you on.
No problem. I really enjoyed that.
And yeah, we'll be back very soon with the next episode of the BirdGuides Podcast. See you soon.
You have been listening to the BirdGuides Podcast. For the latest and best birding content, visit birdguides.com.